in our offense. We tell the tackle to take the defensive end if he's over him. If he's not, we drive down on the first man who is inside. Fullback, we tell him to take the first man outside the offensive tackle. No one shows. He goes right by this and steals inside. If the YN has the linebacker taken out, he cuts inside. If the YN has the linebacker in, he comes all the way around. If you look at this play, what we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here and try to run this play in the alley.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome into Packers Total Access. My name is Clayton. You can check us out on Packernet.com. You can find me on Twitter at Packers_access. And we've actually got a special guest coming on tonight, so we're going to cut straight to the chase. We've got our favorite Packers insider, Mr. Paul Bretl, on the line with us tonight. Paul, how are you doing, pal?
I'm doing excellent. Always happy to talk Packers with you, Clayton. And I got to say, that intro video gives me goosebumps watching that.
It's pretty cool, right? We actually found that there is a YouTube channel called Spread Offense, and I think they've got a website called spreadoffense.com, and I seen that video that they spliced together and actually marked on the screen, and I was like, hey, would you guys mind if I put that in my intro? And they're like, dude, we would love it. So that's how it came about. I would love to take credit for creating that, but I didn't. It was those awesome people over at spreadoffense.com. But yeah, so I want to ask you a question, Paul, before we get into some Packers talk. And it just hit me. I'm already off cuff. You're going, oh God, what's he going to ask?
Let's do it.
What is your we're coming up the night before the game, right? And we got our first preseason game. What's the night before a game normally look like for you? And it can even be regular season because I know you've got some press pass and stuff like that. So, kind of what's the night before look like for you?
Honestly, the night before is probably the quietest part of the week for me, believe it or not, because any sort of the pregame analysis and looking ahead to matchups and all that stuff has been done at this point for me. The day before, if it's a Sunday game, regular season, Saturday, there isn't any media availability. So, we're not talking with the floor. We're not in the locker room, anything like that. So honestly, the day before is usually the quietest part. And I'll work on I do like a final thoughts article that I post the morning of each game. But other than that, I'm guessing that, or I feel like that might be the opposite of what you'd think. But up until that point, I've been knocking out everything I need to. And now we just kind of wait for the game to start and everything we're going to talk about and watch.
That's awesome. So kind of the calm before the storm, right?
Yep.
I love it. I love it. First of all, we got a super chat from Mike Hebring. Mike, thank you so much for the support, buddy. We appreciate you. And we got Dakota here in the chat. Just want to read these off real quick. He says, "Woo, excited to hear from Paul Bretl. We're going to start a Paul Bretl fan club is what we're going to do." Anyway, let's do this. We're going to get you out of here quick tonight. I know you got stuff to do, Paul. I had kind of chatted with you offline and just had three questions that were, I don't know, it was just on the forefront of my mind. Like, I wonder how Paul feels about these three things, right? And let's just get right into the first one. The first question really being about Jordan Love. I mean, he's the talk of camp, right? So, and what I'd ask you is, a couple weeks into camp, how do you feel Jordan Love is progressing? Maybe what's one strength and one weakness, if those two things kind of pop out to you, Paul? How are we feeling about Jordan Love? Because, like I said, we're roughly 2 weeks into camp, about to go into our first preseason game. Seems like he's creating momentum, but sometimes us at a distance are so starved for football, we're kind of missing the forest for the trees, if you will. But how are you feeling about Jordan so far?
Yeah, there's definitely still up and downs. There's throws pretty much every practice, maybe one or two that he would definitely like to have back. But what I will say, the good stretches of football seem to be becoming more consistent and a little bit longer. I look back at the family night game last Saturday as what I feel like an example that kind of encapsulates what we've seen recently, where at the start of the game, there was some missed throws. I mean, there was that deep crosser to Musgrave he should have hit. There was Musgrave down the seam. It might have been the very next play or two plays later, like, got to hit that. Romeo Dobbs down the right sidelines had a step on Jair. Wasn't able to connect. Like, those are throws he should make. And Matt LaFleur even said afterwards, there's probably a little adrenaline, a little extra juice going through Love at that time. But he started to really settle in, and he took what the defense gave him, took what was available, and the offense was able to create some big play opportunities from it as well. During the 2-minute drill on a very similar crosser that he missed Musgrave on earlier, connected for a big gain. There was a catch and run opportunity on a slant to Christian Watson for about 15, 20 yards, if I recall. And then from about the 21-yard line, a really nice pass to Watson in the corner of the end zone. Corey Ballantyne was in very good coverage. It was a well-placed ball and a really good contested catch by Watson. So to me, that kind of encapsulates a little bit more of what we're seeing, where there's been, some throws you'd hope to see him make, or some that he'd like to have back, but being able to, take what's there from the defense. And then that practice, I should say, was really good from the standpoint of we saw some explosive plays being generated. In terms of, what's stood out and, a strength, so to speak, him and the offense as a whole has been really, really good. And I think they've been at their best when they're attacking the middle of the field. And, that's going to be one of the big differences that we're going to see from Jordan Love under center versus Aaron Rodgers. Like, obviously I could be proven wrong, but when we get to week 1, I'm not expecting this to look like this completely different offense that we've seen from past years. The bones of it are there and what we're going to see. But as we know, Aaron Rodgers wasn't a big attacker of the middle of the field, but that's an important part of the LaFleur offense. Dusty Evely writes for Cheesehead TV and Packer Report. He crunched all the numbers. He went back to 2019, and between 2019 and last season, Jimmy Garoppolo of the Niners, of course, attacked the middle of the field the most of any quarterback in football during that span, about 60% of his time. I just looked at Brock Purdy's sample size, and he was right at about that 60% too as well. So we know the LaFleur offense stems from that Shanahan system. So it's going to be a big part of it. And the Packers have that speed, Watson, Reed, Musgrave. It gets those guys in space, catching the ball on the run, setting up yards after the catch opportunities. Hopefully hopefully that takes a little bit of the playmaking burden off of Love and allows those guys to pick up yak and generate those explosive plays, which is a little bit of what I just mentioned with the slant to Christian Watson and the pass to Musgrave across the middle. So the offense as a whole, Love in particular, they've been doing a really good job there. Area to improve upon, I would say it's just the consistency with the deep ball. They've been able to definitely connect on a few of them, but overthrows as well has been pretty consistent as well on those deep passes. And I'm sure to a degree it's, Love still learning those receivers. And, I'm guessing anyways, coming into this offseason, it wasn't a ton of time that him, Dobbs, Watson had spent connecting in practice. So I think that's a part of it, obviously, as well. He's a first-time starting quarterback, so I'm sure that plays a factor as well. But again, this isn't to say they haven't been able to connect. I'm sure we all saw that video today from Packers, their Twitter account of that connection to Dobbs, but he's missed a few as well. So, that's one of the areas that stands out in terms of what, an area where they can improve upon. Looking ahead to the Bengals game, a big thing, and I wrote this in an article, like, what am I watching for? I think right now it's just protecting the ball, not getting turnovers and not even, throwing turnover-worthy passes. The Packers, I believe, are 33-3 under Matt LaFleur when they win the turnover battle. Wow. So obviously that's really important. You add a young offense, like, when the 2020 version of the Packers, Aaron Rodgers and that offense, obviously they're probably more likely to overcome a turnover deficit than what this offense will be, at least early on. And speculating, of course, but so I think that's going to be a big thing is tomorrow. How does he do in those, what sounds like few series he's going to play in protecting the ball?
Gotcha. Good stuff. Good stuff. And the only other question, it can just be yes, no, just a short answer.
Mm-hmm.
When you say you've seen him overthrowing, would you say there's been more overthrows on deep passes or underthrows?
From my recollection, I would say overthrows.
Great. That's what I want to hear as a fan, right? It's like if you're going to miss, miss out there, right?
But the defender isn't.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Let's get on to the second question here, Paul. How do you feel about this defensive front seven? Who's impressed the most? Maybe who hasn't? I want to give you a window there to talk about the negative too. However, man, everything I'm seeing, it seems like this defensive front's been pretty impressive from the big boys up front to the linebackers there. Just that whole front seven, how they like to mug that A and B gap with Quay. And I don't know, man, I'm getting really excited about seeing this defensive front play. What stood out to you there?
Yeah, I definitely am as well. And I need to revert back to the mindset of, especially against the run, hey, you guys got to show me in the regular season when it matters. But I've been really impressed with the play of the defensive line. TJ Slayton has been really, really good. He's been putting Josh Myers, through the ringer a little bit through these practices. Devontae Wyatt looks like he's poised to make that, year two leap that we often talk about with second year players. Those flashes that we saw earlier in camp, specifically as a pass rusher, are just becoming so much more consistent. When he bursts through the backfield, he does so quickly. It's been really impressive. And then Carl Brooks, fifth-round rookie, has strung together some really impressive practices over the last week. And Colby Wooden cemented himself as the fourth edge rusher, interior defensive lineman in that rotation. There's just been a consistent push as a whole, as an interior defensive line unit. The offense, for the most part, has really not generated too many big runs running between the tackles, which, of course, is great to see. And I think I talked about this on last week's show, how that unit just looks so much faster with Wyatt taking on a larger role, the addition of Wooden and Brooks. And, like I said, going back to that Brandon Staley defense, which Joe Barry was brought here to run, Brandon Staley said it's important that we have gap penetrators versus the Lancasters and Lowrys, who are space cloggers and, are meant to eat up space. Okay. And one, benefit of having a TJ Slayton, for example, in the middle is that means Kenny Clark's not in the middle. He was actually, and we take it with a grain of salt, but he was listed on the depth chart as a defensive end when most of his snaps throughout his career here in Green Bay have come, in those A gaps, in those B gaps. So what that does is it means more one-on-one opportunities for Kenny Clark. And, well, that's always a good thing. So I've been really impressed with that group. From the clips and stuff I saw yesterday on Twitter, it looked like they did really well in some of those one-on-one drills going against the Bengals offensive line. And I know I'm not terribly familiar with the Bengals depth chart by any means, but I know that they got a pretty stout starting unit anyway. So promising to see, but again, they'll have to carry that momentum into the regular season. At edge rusher, been really impressed with Lucas Van Ness so far. The speed, the power is evident. Like you just see it from him. There drove Yosh Nijman into the backfield. There's one where he just bullied Josiah DeGore into the backfield, and there's been several run defense reps where I've been really impressed with him as well, because we think of his skill set, even his position as edge rusher. We think about getting sacks and pressures, but that group has to perform well against the run too. And he's had several reps where he's done a really good job of setting the edge, forcing the ball carrier inside, or even on play actions, like not necessarily just darting in a straight line towards the quarterback right away and losing contain, but, identifying the quarterback got the ball, does the running back got the ball, and then going from there. So been really impressed with him. And then to the linebackers, Devondre Campbell, Quay Walker, they've just been steady. I've noticed scrolling through Twitter, there aren't a ton of, tweets about stuff that they've done, but it's just because they're just solid. They're just doing what they're supposed to, filling gaps at the line of scrimmage, flowing sideline to sideline. If the ball comes over the middle to their area, they're pretty close by that. Maybe they're not making plays on the ball, but they're limiting yards after the catch opportunity. So I've been really impressed with that front seven as a whole. Jerry Montgomery, run game coordinator, said, we focus on the interior defensive line when it comes to stopping the run, but it takes that entire unit to be better in that capacity. There really isn't, and I'm not trying to be a homer by any means, but there's nothing that like leaps out as, as an evident weakness. And that doesn't mean that there aren't any. I think the biggest thing right now is just being able to take what they've done in practice and do it when it matters during the regular season. But this edge rusher rotation is a lot deeper than what it was a year ago. I remember it being one of the bigger concerns that I had going into the season. And unfortunately, when Rashawn Gary got injured, we saw the effects of that. What I will say is, because I know he's a name on the minds of a lot of individuals, is Brenton Cox. Undrafted rookie out of Florida. He's been pretty much with the third team defense the entire training camp up to this point. And there really haven't been a ton of those flash plays. There just haven't been. And in a crowded edge rusher room, it's going to be, interesting to see, because keeping 6 edge rushers, that's a lot. That's a lot of guys to keep. And, I was pontificating before training camp began. Like, could they put Brenton Cox on the roster? Kind of like what they did with Caleb Jones last year. I know he started on the practice squad, but he spent most of the year on the 53 in a developmental role. Like, could they take a swing with him in that capacity if they're fearful that a team's going to take him off the practice squad? But the only player from that group that I could see being unseated is Justin Hollins. And the reason being because from a cap perspective, he's not a roster lock. I think it's like 155,000 in dead cap if they release him. But he spent a lot of time with the ones. He's on the field with a few of the different starting special teams units. He was solid here last year, and the pass rush coordinator, Jason Rebrovich, said that almost immediately he took on a leadership role in that room, joining the team halfway through the season. So if there was going to be someone that Cox replaced, if they weren't going to keep 6, to me, that's where it is. You're a team in a transition year. You take the high upside rookie on the back end of the roster versus the veteran at what looks like on paper deep position group who's going to play a rotational role for one season. Like, in that sense of thinking through it, it might make more sense. But again, based on how Hollins has been utilized, again, with the ones on special teams, I just have a hard time seeing him not being on the roster right now.
Yeah, it's so tough. We talked about it the other day, and we were talking about that 6. And it's like, okay, well, if Gary starts on the pup, then we think Brenton Cox makes this roster, and then all of a sudden, here comes Gary off the pup, and it's going, let's see what happens now. But yeah, it's always that tough game you're playing. Trying to keep other teams from poaching your practice squad, obviously. So, yeah, good stuff. Let's move on to the final question here, Paul. I could talk to you all night, man.
I appreciate
picking
that.
your brain. Third question, final one. Let's call it the pass catching progress report. All right. How do you see the receivers and tight ends? Like, how are they looking as a whole? And maybe who has most impressed you there from each of those two positions? Maybe what's the one receiver that you go, man, they've had a fantastic camp? And maybe the same thing with tight ends. I know we're getting really excited about Luke Musgrave, and I got to be completely honest. I did not expect Luke Musgrave to occupy that number 1 on the depth chart right off the bat and hold on to it. It seems like he's really holding on strong, and especially with the depth chart releasing and DeGuara kind of sliding to fullback, it seems like we are going to go to some of that San Francisco 21 personnel. But how do you see in this receiver tight end group now 2 weeks into camp?
Yeah, we'll start with the tight end group. Yeah, Musgrave, he's been basically a day one starter going back to OTAs. Like, he's going to play a big role in this offense, and it's easy to see why. I'm sure many of you have seen the clips of him on the practice field. That size, that speed that he brings to the position, he is just such a matchup problem. And I think we're going to see a lot of them lined up on the boundary as well, not just playing in line or in the slot. I was looking up these numbers on PFF, and Robert Tonyan, actually 20% of his snaps last season, or roughly around that figure, came lined up on the boundary. So we're going to see Musgrave out there. There's one rep from practice that stands out in my mind where he was against Corey Ballantyne on the boundary, had a step or two on him down the sideline. Like, he's just Matt LaFleur said it best. He's different. He's just different than the type of tight ends they've had here. In terms of like many young pass catchers or many young tight ends specifically, consistency. There have been some drop passes. On top of that, in the blocking game, it's got to be an area that he's going to improve. His biggest impact is going to come in the passing game for the reasons mentioned, the big play ability, but also the opportunity he creates for others. Like, when you have that skill set on the field, it's going to create better spacing for others to operate. The attention that he draws is going to create other opportunities for others. So, but where he's going to have to improve is the blocking. Had the chance to talk to him in the locker room about that. And he, because Matt LaFleur said tight end's the second most difficult position on offense to transition to after quarterback. And Musgrave said the biggest thing for him has been the blocking transition. So you see the potential, but we've also seen the ups and downs with it as well. As far as Tucker Kraft goes, I thought family night was hands down his best practice so far. He threw a couple key blocks that opened up running lanes. We saw his yard after the catch ability, which he did a ton of at South Dakota State, caught one ball in the flat and was able to turn it upfield for some yards after the catch, made a red zone catch, a contested catch. So hands down his best practice. He was third on the Packers depth chart behind Musgrave and behind Tyler Davis. And based on what I've seen in practice, to me, that tracks because Musgrave's the pass catcher and Tyler Davis, to me, has been the most consistent blocker at the tight end position. So again, that isn't to say he's not going to see playing time. He's going to be a big part of this offense. All three of those guys are. But again, it's about the consistency of it. But he's someone who's been picking up some momentum as of late. Switching over to receiver, Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, they both look like they're taking that year two leap. Matt LaFleur talked about how Christian Watson's playing so much faster. Romeo Doubs in the locker room after one practice said, he's playing faster as well. You get into year two, you're comfortable with the system. You know your responsibilities. You know the responsibilities of everyone around you. And again, there's less thinking and you're just out there reacting and playing. And that's what we want football players to do. So both look like they've taken those steps. I think it was Sam Monson from Pro Football Focus was at the joint practice. And he basically said Romeo was open all day. And Romeo's route running ability, Matt LaFleur said it. There's refinement that's needed. I'll add that caveat, but he doesn't think there's a route that Romeo can't run. And then with Christian Watson, what we're seeing is not only is he taking on a larger responsibility in terms of, snap counts and targets because he's wide receiver one, but he's being asked to do so much more, moving around the formation, running a greater variety of routes, and that's creating mismatches. We saw that. I'm sure many saw that clip yesterday where he's running a crossing route and he's got a linebacker in coverage on him. That's from that pre-snap movement and, asking him to do different things than we saw a year ago. It's easy to see his speed, the plays he made last year, and just think about being a boundary guy who's going to go downfield and get the ball. And he's going to do that. But his role in this offense is really going to expand. Matt LaFleur talked about he's just one of the smartest football players he's been around at the receiver position. And so he's been, to me, really, really impressive in that regard, just because of just how much else he's being asked to do and making plays with that. And obviously that's going to create opportunities for him and everyone else in the offense.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. We actually broke down the play you were talking about with Christian Watson on the backer. And when we slowed it down, Luke Musgrave was in the boundary X, and then you had Tucker Kraft in that bunch set. And what's crazy is it's technically, 12 personnel, but you've got one of those two tight ends stretching the field. So they had to make a decision. Mm-hmm. Are we going to put that corner on Musgrave, or are we going to put him on Christian Watson? And then at that point for Jordan Love, it's simply, okay, they got the linebacker on Christian on this little drag shallow cross. Let's just let him run away from him, right? It's pretty exciting stuff.
You want to talk about mismatches? When we're going to see Musgrave on the boundary and then Christian Watson lined up in the slot. I mean,
oh man,
the speed, the size of defenses are going to have to contend with.
Yeah. And let's air that thing out every chance we get, Paul. Why not? Everybody's got us picked to finish dead last anyway, right? Let's just go out there and have
see what we can do.
Love it. Paul, I can't thank you enough. First of all, I want to say this, great article you wrote this morning, and for those of you who haven't checked it out, go check it out. Go to his Twitter page. It's at Paul_Bretl, and wrote a really cool article on what to watch for tomorrow night in each position. I love those. Your article is perfect for someone like me. It's not wordy. You don't use these words I can't pronounce. People hear my accent and they go, that guy is not educated, and they are correct. I read your articles and they're just straight to the point. I absolutely love them. But
appreciate that.
I said, Paul writes at PackersWire.com, Dairyland Express. Again, follow him on Twitter at Paul_Bretl. Paul, thank you so much for your time, man. We really appreciate it.
Hey, appreciate it, Clayton. Always happy to jump on Talk Packers.
Awesome. Have a great night, buddy.
You as well.
All right. That was Paul Bretl, man. I love that guy. That dude is awesome. Absolutely awesome. I'm telling you, how he doesn't have more followers on Twitter is beyond me, because he just does an amazing, amazing job. We're going to bring Jacob in now from the Packernet Fantasy Podcast. Jacob, how you doing, bub?
I'm good.
Is that not good stuff, man?
That was great. That was Paul is becoming one of my quick favorites, my go-tos. Like, I just copy and paste whatever that guy posts because it's the truth.
Yeah,
that's what it
absolutely.
is.
Absolutely. Looks like we got Tim from Green Bay on the line as well. Tim, how you doing, bud?
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Oh, we're doing good, man. Doing great. Just sitting here picking Paul's brain. I'm like you tonight. I got 2 pages of notes keeping up with him. But I want to give a shout out real quick to Josh Martin in the chat for the super chat. Hey, we appreciate you supporting the stream, buddy. He said, you see the Bills' new stadium is 3 months into build and already $300 million over budget, but yet fans want to talk trash about us buying stock. Isn't it funny how the Packers give us an opportunity to support our team, right? They say, hey, look, if you'd like a really cool piece of memorabilia, we're going to do a stock drive. We've been doing this since the 20s, right? And the fans kind of rally together and help the team out. That's just silly, stupid, and it's evil for the organization to ask the fans for money. But in these big cities, they force taxpayers to pay for the stadiums, and they don't have any choice. That just always blows my mind. So, Josh, yeah, we're on the same page. And, again, thank you for the super chat. Again, Mike, thank you for the super chat as well, buddy. We appreciate the support. Let's start with you, Jacob. What was your key takeaway there from Paul's assessment? Man, like I said, we covered a lot of things. We covered Jordan Love update. We covered the defensive front seven, and then, of course, the pass catchers. What stood out to you the most, man?
Honestly, what was kind of funny, just a random thing, just as you talked about him being like an actual Packers beat reporter, he gets to actually pose questions. He's really in the mix. And you asked him, like, if he gets nervous before like what his regimen is. We all know what like a player's regimen is. Like, they probably have these rituals. It's kind of interesting to think of the fact that like a reporter has like a regimen too. It's like, or somebody that covers the Packers, they have like a pregame ritual and all that kind of stuff. And it's just, I don't know. It's cool to get in the mind of somebody that covers them for a living. And like I said, if you watch, go to Paul's Twitter or X. God, I'm never going to get used to that. And it's he's got, like you said, what to look for. And I read through that article. It's like perfect. I kind of highlighted it, I think, yesterday, where the battles that he was kind of looking at, and a lot of them are pretty obvious, but a lot of them are kind of just, little subtle things. And I don't know, man. I just really like the way that guy reports on the Packers. It's clear that he's a fan. Rob
Right.
Demovsky.
And
no,
Jason will. No, let's don't call
I mean, kind of, yeah. But it's no, man. I mean, I just it's just refreshing, I guess, to hear a guy that, like you said, I don't understand how he doesn't have more Twitter followers or more of a following, because that dude's stuff is just, it's to the point, it's succinct, it's very good. It's much like Andy Herman's stuff. It's like there's no filler. You just get what you came for. And so did we the practice today? Was there a practice? Was it not really reported on, or was it just like basically a walkthrough kind of thing because it's pregame?
To me, it looked like a day off. Tim may know the answer to that. If you do, Tim, just answer yes or no. Do you know if today there was a practice or or just a walkthrough day off? What was it in Cincy today?
I can't confirm, but I did hear yesterday in some of the post practice interviews they were talking about a practice tomorrow. So I don't know if maybe they're doing some kind of walkthrough tomorrow before the game. So I don't know if they practiced today or not. I would think they did at least something, but who knows?
Yeah, I think they're just kind of holding it close to the vest, right? That seems to be the game plan this year. Mike in the chat said, love the rough stuff yesterday in practice. One thing this team must do is get more physical. I completely agree, man. It's what it's all about, man. Football, at the end of the day, it comes down to who's going to smack the other one in the mouth like this, Mike.
Roadhouse.
So, Tim, tell me, what was your big takeaway there from Paul? What stood out to you? Like I said, man, we talked Jordan Love. We talked the defensive front seven. I imagine you got excited when we talked defense, but also we covered the pass catchers as well. What stood out to you, Bub?
I wanted to go to the defense right away, but I did get excited when he talked about Jay Love, because we were kind of talking about this in the last couple of weeks, where he was talking about consistency with the deep ball kind of being a weakness. And it's like, well, we've kind of known that about Jay Love since college, that the deep balls, and you brought up a great point. They're not underthrown. He's tending to lead them a little longer, which is better. And clearly the issue is tweaking the accuracy. So he's getting the ball there. We just need to, hone that touch. And that's kind of like what I was talking about the last time we discussed this. So to hear Paul bring that up and to know that he's seeing that too, just makes me feel really good about QB1 right now.
No, I completely agree. That was the big question. As he was saying it, I was going, as long as they're overthrown, right? And I know people got frustrated, with Aaron Rodgers when he would overthrow, but that's what that's all about, guys. Like, controlling that turnover differential. If you're going to miss away from the defender, don't hang one up there for him. Go ahead, Jacob.
No, I'm just trying to when I was trying to listen to that interview, matching what my preferences, answers would be as I'm listening to Paul, and we talked about what we like about Jordan Love, what we don't like about Jordan Love. I think it's very clear that at this point, Jordan Love has shown that he has the footwork, he has the release, he's got the drop, he can read his progressions. He seems like he can walk up to the line of scrimmage and pre-snap, he can dictate the defense, he can try to make some audibles, some checkdowns. The only part, like Paul talked about, is the consistency. Ryan talks about it all the time. I have in my notes when I looked at it was the deep ball consistency and then overall consistency. And it's like, it sounds so simple, but I don't know. This Jordan Love thing has been the same conversation I feel like since the day we drafted. It's like, we just don't know until we know. We just don't know. And it's like,
when are we gonna know?
And then like Ryan talked about in his podcast multiple times, it's we have went from, well, it's just mini camp, it's just OTAs, it's just preseason, it's just scrimmage, it's just week 1, it's just the first half of the season, and then it's like, okay, then we can make our decision apparently. But at this point, I'm encouraged by the way that he's. So here's what I wrote down: footwork, reading defense as well, working through his progressions, release, and his overall leadership. That's a pretty good. And then the dislikes, I had deep ball accuracy and overall consistency. Like, to me, that pretty much sums it up. And that's a big if. He has all these intangibles. He has all these weird traits that, should make this guy, if he's firing on all cylinders, a top 15, at least a top 10, maybe a top 5 quarterback if, what freezes over. So I'm excited.
Bill in the chat says, does Carpenter make the 53? And I kind of couple this with Eric Sutherland's question as well. He says, how many safeties you think we keep? It almost feels like that safety room was so crowded. They told Carpenter, look, your only spot on this roster is if you can really be a special teams ace and you can play a little linebacker for us in an emergency pinch. So, man, both of those are great questions. They really are. I'm not sure. As far as safeties go, I think Dallin Leavitt makes the roster. I think Rudy Ford. I'm going to kind of go from the bottom and back to the top. I'm going to go Dallin Leavitt for special teams purposes. I'm going to go Rudy Ford, Darnell Savage, because we're paying him a fairly big chunk of money, right? And let's see who else here. We've got it's either Jonathan Owens or Tarvarius Moore. It kind of feels like Tarvarius Moore might have screwed himself out of a roster spot here early on. I don't know what the NFI was about early on. Well, you haven't heard his name at all, fellas, have you, Tim? Have you heard Tim? This is a great question for Tim. What was going on with Tarvarius Moore when you were in Green Bay, Tim?
Very little. And the NFI, it was a back issue, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Didn't he do that? And Coach LaFleur kind of made a kind of side out of the side of his neck kind of response when he was asked about it, like, oh, he hurt his back, so maybe it was some off the field kind of thing. Clearly, I mean, if it's an NFI injury. So, but I don't know if it's so much that issue as it has been the fact that we're hearing Jonathan Owens is playing at a high level so far, especially the last, I would say, 3 to 4 practices of camp. So maybe it's more of just J.O. is stepping up into that role. And I mean, if you held the gun to my head and said, who's your starters right now, week 1, I would say Savage and Owens at this point. That's just my take on it.
That's sure what it feels like. Definitely what it feels like. We got Dakota in Tennessee on the line. Dakota, how you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm doing good. How about y'all?
Oh, we're doing great, man. Just hanging out with the great Paul Bretl, trying to get a few tips here before we kick off the first preseason game. Are you jacked up for tomorrow, bub?
Dude, I'm so jacked up. I don't think I called into Packers After Dark and got really excited, and you'll probably hear it after the game. But no, I actually came on here to talk about safeties, and when I joined, I see that y'all were already talking about them. But yeah, no, that's what I'm really fired up about is I want to watch the safeties. I want to watch the I guess outside linebackers. Is that what? And the defensive ends. That's what they're calling them. Those are two positions I'm really looking at for tomorrow's game.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's one thing we didn't talk about with Paul, and it's because I wanted to kind of see who's standing out in that defensive front seven along with pass catchers, as opposed to we know the safety room's a train wreck, right? So, it's something that's definitely concerning. Just like our shower says in the chat, I remember when we lost Robinson back in the day. Bad safety play can decimate a defense, and we don't have much back there. But one thing to think about too, our showers is, dude, we can't get any worse than we were last year. I mean, we graded out at the absolute freaking bottom when it comes to PFF grades, and when I turn on the tape, it confirmed the PFF grades at the safety position. It really did. Dakota, do you got anything else? Any question? Any comment? Anything else you're excited about, bub? Before we let you go, we got Andy in the hopper here too, man. It's so good to hear from you.
No, that's fine. The one thing I wanted to say is, of course, you can't take much from it because, well, it's me saying it. But I personally think that they're going to have Rudy Ford and Darnell Savage doing similar job duties. But I don't see, just because of what I saw Jonathan Owens and what he did last year, I don't see him doing more than, I don't know, what I would expect what's that called? Hybrid linebacker type, just, gap duties, strong safety, don't do much in coverage unless he's the second man covering. So I really don't see him, unless it's a Rasul Douglas type situation where he just kind of kills it once he joins us. But I don't really see him being able to be that, free range safety type.
No, definitely. And the thing that I worry about, Dakota, and you're spot on with that. Jonathan Owens is way better tackler than he is in coverage, and the way this safety position works in this defense with Joe Barry is they're pretty much playing right and left safety. There's no longer strong and free safety. So all that's going to take is them flipping the formation to where that rotation, if we are in a cover 3 or a cover 1 man, that rotation has to come down on the strong side. And if that's the case, then guess who's going to be in coverage? It's going to be Jonathan Owens. Now, they may have a game plan for that to where they can just call the signal out the way Rudy Ford will stay free range. But I really don't see Jonathan Owens beating out Savage or Ford. I think what it really comes down to is Darnell Savage and Keyshawn Nixon in the slot. Who plays the slot better, Keyshawn Nixon or Darnell Savage? If for some reason Darnell Savage has a better camp than Keyshawn Nixon, and they say, you know what, Key, let's just stick with kick return, we're going to let Savage play that, then maybe they work Jonathan Owens in, or if they run a little big nickel. So I'm with you, man. Safety's fascinating for sure this year. Good stuff, dude. Hey, Dakota, we appreciate you calling in, man. As always, it's so good to talk to you.
Oh, man, absolutely. I'll talk to y'all later.
All right, buddy. Have a good night, man.
All right, bye.
All right, that was Dakota in Tennessee. Let's go to Andy Monday, still stuck in Kansas. Andy, how you doing, buddy?
Very excited about tomorrow night's game. I mean, for quite a few years, it was wake me up in January because we knew they were going to make the playoffs. And, some people wake me up.
Sounds like a Green Day song, don't it, Andy?
I listen to way older music than that, but I guess. Try not to be any kind of idiot, let alone an American one.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, I'm not as thick as you dumb I am, really. So with the preseason starting tomorrow, I've been waiting to hear what people's opinion about the team is, especially around this ridiculous core of, well, they don't have Aaron Rodgers, so I guess they're not going to be very good. Now, if you see the reports coming out of camp, but Paul Bretl has been fantastic, and I'll get to some of his D-line talk because I was excited that he talked about that. But if you take what you've heard after you've listened to that series, The Play Callers, hopefully you realize, and if there are people that haven't heard that podcast, do that, because it should erase from your mind we don't have this guy anymore. I know. Don't worry about that. What we do have, according to that five-part podcast, we have the offensive scheme and the defensive scheme that are both the schemes that people want.
Yep.
Both of the schemes. Now, someone would say, well, then how come it didn't work? Now, Clayton, you've been doing a very vigilant job as far as saying to people, look, it was the Matt LaFleur offense last year. So what's changed? I think we have better pieces. And as I was listening, to that and listening to that podcast and thinking about the reports, if the schemes are fine, how come last year didn't work out? and I'd like the answer to be that we didn't have the pieces. Just think through the offensive wide receiver, tight end weapons coming into this year compared to last year.
Yeah.
Like that's going to make a huge difference in there. And the very end of that podcast says the running game isn't going away, which is funny because a couple weeks ago it was like, well, the running game doesn't matter. Both of those are coming out in the same offseason. Like, okay, well, which one? And I go back to this little stat. Matt LaFleur's been coaching our team for 4 years. 2 of those years we've rushed over 2,000 yards a year, and one of them, one of those seasons, it's been over 1,900 yards a year. Now, what does that mean? Well, in all of McCarthy's time, we ran over 2,000 yards once. During Mike Sherman's time, I think it was once or twice, and Mike Holmgren's time, 0. So just in 4 seasons, we've had 2 seasons, 2,000 yards or more. And I've also been thinking, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you here, Jacob, your fantasy podcast the other day about the over-under with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon.
Yeah.
There's no way that those numbers are high enough. Because if an offense is running 60 to 65 plays a game, and Jordan Love is not going to be, and if Jordan Love is not going to be throwing 35 times a game, well, all the other plays are run plays.
No, I agree. That's just real quick, and I'll let you get back to your spiel there. Yeah, like I really do think that when you look at the over under for the season stats, they're sleeping on Green Bay's every single one of their positions. Jordan Love's, I believe they have him at like 3,300 yards passing. I mean that's fair, but I think he can blow past that. I think Aaron Jones was around like 900-ish, I believe it was. AJ was around like 800, 850-ish. I'm within probably 50 or 100 yards. But then they also, the biggest thing I thought was most criminal, they had Christian Watson at 5.5 touchdowns for the season.
Crazy.
For the season.
And he missed 5 games last year.
Go put the mortgage down on a bet. I'm just kidding. Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Disclaimer. Andy, you got
right. Andy, you got to get back in. You got to get in that league, dude. How come you're not in there?
Come on, Andy. Get in the fantasy league, dude.
I'm trying to work out the other fantasy league that I'm in, and that one's kind of floundering. So I've been recruiting people for that more than anything else. But
here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do to that other fantasy league.
Roadhouse.
Right. Kick them to the curb, Andy.
Crazy for Swayze, that's for sure.
Yeah, you got that right.
Was Rob Lowe in that movie?
In Roadhouse?
In Roadhouse?
Yeah.
Was Pretty Boy guys?
I don't know, man. That's a good question. I should know that.
I just always wondered.
I don't care for the pretty boy scene. I'm here for the fight scene. That's it.
I've always wondered if he'd be in a movie where he's a thief and he like goes after the big box hardware stores, because then we could all ask, how many Lowe's could Rob Lowe rob if Rob Lowe could rob Lowe's? I just think that's
you're not going to top that.
Okay, I'm going to chart some stuff tomorrow night about D-line play and the offensive formations and stuff, and then I don't know, just kind of focus in on that and see how our pieces fall. Because boy, if the scheme is right and they think we're going to be bad, that means that people think that our pieces are all wrong, and I just think that's doing. Give me the evidence where they're horrible, because that's really what it is. I mean, we're going to have the offensive production just based on the evidence of the efficiency from the running backs, the variations that our other weapons can do, the offensive line, which I think is really coming and is being solidified by the coaching staff. And the only way we're not going to make those statistical heights is if we don't run enough plays. And the only reason we wouldn't run enough plays is if our offense never moves the ball. Otherwise, the plays are going to be there, and the efficiency, it's just math. It's really all that is.
Yeah.
So tomorrow's not going to show all of that. Tomorrow's going to show a few things, and
but
let's just
football,
get it started.
Andy. It is football, my friend.
Yeah. It's been great.
We appreciate you calling in, bud. Anything else?
Okay. I got to rest my voice. I talked a lot. Nope.
No, you're
we'll
good,
see
dude. Hey, thanks for
again.
calling in, buddy.
Andy.
That's Andy.
Right, bye-bye.
Kansas. All right. Let's get back to the chat here. Let's see here.
That SOB had me checking my phone. I'm like, dude, Rob Lowe is Rob Lowe, and
Well,
in the
we had
chat.
we had a confirmation here. Let's see who it was. I'm trying to think here. Jeff in the chat. Jeff bringing all the facts. He said no. Lowe was not in Roadhouse. I didn't think he was. He was in one of those old school movies like Outsiders or something like that, where Patrick
Sang
Swayze
Almost
was in.
Fire.
Yeah. So
Jeff Machete.
anyway, that's the
Rob
stuff.
Lowe did play a thief in Tommy Boy, though, if you remember that.
He
Yeah,
did.
well,
You're right.
Yeah,
Look at that stuff. You don't get this on other podcasts. I'm
that's
sorry.
right. Deep dives here,
You do
guys.
not. Oh my goodness. All right. Let's see here. Let's go to the chat right here. Let's see what our buddy Garrett has to say. He says, go back and watch last year's season opener versus Chicago. Aaron Jones had 2 touchdowns in the first half. I truly believe the Pack can do even better against the Bears defense this year. The Packers offense is much faster now, in my opinion. Yeah. That's the thing too. Like it was what Andy was talking about too. He did a really good job. Great job. Great call, Andy. Talking about how these aren't the same weapons, the same receivers, the same, and people go, yeah, they are, Clayton. No, they're not. They've got 1 full year under their belt. They've got another training camp under their belt. And they don't have to worry about the curve of learning the terminology, learning the checks, all those things. And they've gotten now 2 off season. Well, I want to say 2 off seasons, but 2 mini camps and 2 training camps working with Jordan Love, because we know that, Aaron didn't plug into the offseason program. I think they're gonna come out and surprise people. And Jacob, when you talk about 3,300 yards passing, man, I'm sorry, dude, that seems criminally low.
Yeah, as you're sitting here talking, I just had this weird epiphany just hit me. So literally, we could break it down, and we don't have to take a ton of time, but you could break down every single positional group on this team, barring the quarterback. I think it's a clear and without any argument that we've gotten better at each positional. Think about it. Running back, you'd argue that the only way you could get better is if your third running back is better than the other one. I would argue that even if Goodson I would argue that's an improvement. Slight, I know, but an improvement. We don't have a fullback. Let's not talk about it. Tight end, 100% improvement. We got 2 brilliant, fast tight ends. And we have DeGuara, who's somewhat of a veteran / H-back who can maybe fill that fullback role. Look at the offensive line. There's no reason to believe that we're not stronger this year going into week 1 than we were last year. That's 100% true. No question. Yeah. You look at the defensive side of the ball, edges. Even if Rashawn Gary is not healthy for week 1, we have Van Ness, and we have a crazy good deep lineup right now, a deep rotation. Interior defensive line, clearly better. We lost Lowry and Jerron Reed. Like I said, not talking smack, but we have Wyatt, Brooks, Wooden, guys that are hungry. Middle linebacker. We have a mentally healthy Quay and a physically healthy Devondre. You look at corners. We've got more healthy corners that have more experience with a couple new great rookies. Safety, maybe you could argue, is not quite an improvement, but we don't know. So it's like Ryan always says, the not knowing is not a negative. It just means it's unknown. Yeah. Our special teams, I'd argue, maybe takes a step back because of Anders, but other than that, dude, this is a team that's improving. So it is really on Jordan Love's shoulders. And I hate to put more pressure on him, but it really is. If this guy can even be decent, I really think that this could be crazy sneaky. I'll say it, 10 wins. If we hit 10 wins, just statistically, that's when we make the playoffs. Maybe it's 11 because of the added game this year, but I think we can get there. I really do.
Yeah, definitely. Tim, we're going to go to you next, buddy. You just sitting over there listening like a good soldier, man. I swear we haven't forgotten about you. We got a question here in the chat from PZZRVP. Say that 3 times fast. Clayton, there are ways to cover for weaknesses in defense. How can the Packers cover for the weakness at safety? You got 2 elements, in my opinion. I'm going to call you peasy, all right? Easy peasy, lemon squeezy. So there's two elements to the safety play in this particular type of defense. Obviously, you've got to be able to play catch man. You got to be able to play man match within this Joe Barry defense. I'm trying to think of how to word it where I don't try to sound like I'm trying to sound intelligent here. Essentially, the safeties, in most cases, once the receiver breaks the 7-yard threshold, they are now matched up on the number 2 receiver. Unless the number 2 receiver goes shallow and the one crosses his face, then everything changes, okay? And you've got different elements to this, from mod to meg, the apex defenders assignments change, whether it's zone match, man match, all these things. But to answer your question, it's right there at pre-snap is the answer to your question. Putting those two safeties on the shelf and playing that quarters coverage, what you're doing is you're showing the same exact look pre-snap, and that prevents the quarterback from gathering information pre-snap. It's simply why Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, some of the greatest quarterbacks in the history of the game, want to get to the line quick, and they want to read the defense out until the last possible second of the play clock. That's why a lot of those guys aren't very fond of this type of offense, because you've got to take into consideration pre-snap motion, all of those things. So when you're looking at it from the defense's perspective, you don't want to tip that hand. You don't want to give that quarterback any information on the front side. The ball snapped. And here's the other thing. The majority of the offenses in the league now are this Shanahan-style offense. When you're under center and you're running play action, what do you got to do every play action play? You've got to turn your back to the defense and then come back around. If when you snap the ball, the defense is in a look, and then by the time you turn back around, they're in a different look, it causes chaos, right? It's complexity with the illusion of simplicity, as opposed to on offense, it's simplicity with the illusion of complexity, if that makes sense. So I know there's not a lot of Barry fans. I know Mike's one here in the chat. Mike, dude, I respectfully disagree, and it's totally cool. I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong. When I turn on the tape, I don't go, Joe Barry's a moron. I go, these guys aren't tackling. These guys are blowing coverage, you know? When I see multiple defenders look at each other on the tape and go, what are you doing? That tells me, I'm not a bright man, but that tells me somebody didn't do what they were supposed to do. Therefore, how can we even begin to grade this defense if they're not in the right place? Now, to Mike's defense in the chat, whose responsibility is it to coach these guys up, Tim? It is Joe Barry, right? So you've got to put some of that blame on Joe, because it's their responsibility to get them ready. I'm a little more lenient towards Joe Barry, because they're not treating these defenders like kids. Like, okay, we've got to coach them and show them every little thing, because we've said it all off season long, Tim. There's a bunch of first rounders on this defense, right, man?
Absolutely. And, to get even simpler, I mean, what's a great way to prevent, or to go back to the original question, what's a great way to cover up for weaknesses at the safety position? I don't know, have a absolute gang of monsters on your defensive front that are not giving these quarterbacks the time to get the ball out. If you can't get the ball out, I mean, the safety's going to pick his nose all afternoon, because there's not going to be a whole lot of work back there. So, and as far as Joe Barry, man, anyone who is in that camp of, and again, I respectfully disagree with the Joe Barry haters, just like you. Come to a camp, come to a practice. Joe Barry is extremely engaged with these players. I was watching a lot of the drills last week, and, he was playing middle linebacker on a lot of these drills with, the D line and the O line, and just working across the different groups. And, he's engaged as a coach. So if there's any doubt in your mind that he's getting these guys ready to play, I mean, you can literally see it. And, to finish the point, Jair said it himself in the interview. Right. Players got to make plays, just like I always say, man, players got to make plays. And they made a lot of excuses last year. And, maybe it's one of those things where guys didn't, they weren't watching enough film, or they weren't putting in that extra prep needed to know where you're supposed to be and what your responsibilities are, because in the blink of an eye on the field, it can all change. You got to know. So,
yeah.
I mean,
and if you pay attention to, like, all of those excuses that were being made, right? And when you see the mistakes on the back end, Jerry Gray left, right? He went to Atlanta, right? Mm-hmm. It's obvious he didn't see eye to eye with this. Okay, well, he was coaching the DBs. Like, come on, dude. You got to accept some responsibility too, right? And they seem to love Jerry Gray. But I don't know. It's gonna be interesting to see how it unfolds for sure. Coda's got a great question here in the chat. He says there was a bunch of hype about our defense coming out of camp last year. What are the big differences going into this season? The hype that I remember personally, Coda. I'm just going to mention the first thing that comes to mind. I remember people talking about Devontae Wyatt in training camp last year, right? They were talking about how quick he was off the line. Man, this guy, he looks like he's gonna be great. And then he couldn't get on the freaking field. So that's where I do blame the coaches. And this goes back to Mike's point is like, why did we hold Devontae Wyatt back so much instead of turn him loose? And I think that answer is probably I'm not trying to use him as a scapegoat. You guys know I love Aaron Rodgers. I'm an Aaron Rodgers fan. I appreciate everything he's ever done for the organization. But that whole mentality last year was, hey, we're trying to win now. If we think these guys starting gives us just 1/10% of a chance to play a little bit better football today as opposed to 2 weeks from now by getting people snaps now, we're going to stick with those starters. I think that answers the question. This year, I think they're going to turn those guys loose like Lucas Musgrave, which we know they're going to get a good solid rotation. So to answer your question, Coda, to me, man, it seemed like they were holding some people back, right? I mean, think about it this way too, and I don't want to get on a bash fest for the coaches, whether it's LaFleur, Bisaccia, or Joe Barry. But man, when you go back and watch the first quarter of that season, Coda, it's hard to stomach the thought of Amari Rodgers returning kicks and Keyshawn Nixon blocking for him, but that's what the tape was showing. So it's like, I think that's going to be the difference with this defense this year is they're going to turn the young guys loose. I think you're going to see Carl Brooks. I don't think they're going to hold Carl Brooks. I think you'll see Carl Brooks get more snaps this year than Devontae Wyatt did last year, if that makes sense. I think they'll give him more opportunities because he seems to flash. And you heard Paul Bretl, man. He brung his name up, Jacob. He mentioned Carl Brooks by name there again. That's one name that just keeps – and there's multiples, right? I mean, you got Carrington Valentine, you got Carl Brooks, you got these guys that are later round picks that seem to be flashing, don't they?
Yeah, no, I mean it's very encouraging. And one thing again that I'll reiterate that you said, we had Devontae Wyatt. He was shining last year. He's shining this year. The difference is that there's not two veterans that we've already paid a lump sum of money to that are going to take 1,200 snaps away from the interior defensive line. Jerron Reed and Dean Lowry had 1,200 plus snaps between the two of them. Imagine if you even disperse those equally between between Wyatt, between Wooden, and between Brooks. I mean, and like you said, these aren't just one or two things that you hear in camp. It's every day Wyatt looks like a freak. I saw some extended footage from the Bengals scrimmage, well, whatever you want to call it, joint practice yesterday. Wyatt was a freak. He was a freak. If there was not basically a rule that you don't touch the quarterback, you don't even really follow through with your initial get off. You pull off and you just throw your hands up and basically fall away, and then they complete the pass and they call it a completed pass in their notes. But we had multiple with Wyatt and Brooks where if you let that thing go 100%, those dudes are getting flattened down. And it was Jake Browning. It was also Trevor Siemian, who they have on their roster now. So again, not necessarily as far as like the who's who, but Trevor Siemian's he's a veteran quarterback. You know, if anything, you'd think that I still think it's time to pump the brakes and say that the Packers have a wonderful defense. We're going to be amazing. Everything. We definitely need to see what it looks like Friday night. And just like Ryan said, then we got to look to week 2 of preseason, then week 3. We don't know nothing yet until it's, week 1, but then it's just week 1. So, week 2 and so on and so forth. It's just going to be a snowball of emotional, just craziness. We're going to all go, it's going to be a rough ride. But hopefully, like I said, if we finish this year and if we can get Packer fans in the mental headspace to think that an 8-win season is a good year, then I think we'll have a good year. I think we'll all be less stressed. But if we can't tap into like that, probably I hate to say it, but like 80% of Packer fans, that if they see 8-9 or you know what I mean, they're gonna be like, fire everyone, burn the place down, pee on the ashes. Right. Everything needs to be restarted. No, we need to think that like an 8-win season is that's a good year. It's a good year. So we have to be humble enough to accept that. But
definitely. All right, guys. So everybody in the chat, I wanted to try to do this tonight. Okay, go ahead and cut the chat off. I don't want you guys wasting your time chatting when we get to this point because we got to start wrapping the show up. I want to make sure I get to everybody's comments, so I don't want you to feel like, oh man, he didn't get to my comment at the end. So we're gonna kind of read what we got left here and get ready to wrap this thing up. I got a couple film tapes I want to show you guys as well. That's kind of cool. Kevin in the chat said, "Love the show, boys. Jacob always at least one diatribe that gets me so excited for Packers football." I completely agree. PZ in the chat says, See the new choking Bears logo, furrowed brow, mouth open, gasping for air. Only way it could be better is if it were the Vikings purple. I love it. Hey, since you brung that up, let me get the rest of these chats real quick. And remind me, I'm going to show you guys something to do with Justin Fields' stats here in a second. Kevin Rogers, thanks for keeping us Alaskan Packers up to date and informed. They appreciate you listening from Alaska, man. That's awesome. Eric in the chat, keep hearing that we need to bring in a couple veterans. I disagree. Let those young cats roll and see what we got. I'm on board with it now, man. I've been kind of hesitant with that opinion as well. Stans the man in the chat says, how many 300-plus yard games do you think Love will have this year? Rodgers didn't even have one last year. Plus, do you think LaFleur has learned his lesson in the hot hand take at running back? I think this year they're going to kind of turn Aaron Jones loose. I really do. I think they're going to kind of lean on him a little bit more. I know some of these guys here with Packernet, they're like, man, run him till the wheels fall off. But I'm not saying that, but I think we will see the most Aaron Jones we've ever seen this year. I think they'll just kind of turn him loose. I believe that. R. Shower says, I engaged with a lot of never mind, we ain't reading that. That's why you don't show them before you read them. We love you, Showers, but we got kids listening, buddy. If this defense, this is Mike in the chat, if this defense fails again, it's not the players that are going to pay the price. It's Joe, fair or not. That is a fact, Mike. That is an absolute fact there, buddy. Mm-hmm. Fair or not. If they don't perform this year, Joe is probably – Matt's going to get a lot of pressure to get rid of Joe. There's no doubt about it. The defense balled. This is Be the Hammer. The defense balled in 2021, but nobody wants to give Joe credit for that. See, that's the thing, too. Nobody was talking about. We were coming into 2022, fellas, and everybody was just talking about how awesome Joe Barry is in this defense. We get through the first quarter of the season, and literally Tony Romo is on the live broadcast going, this might be the best defense in the league. We forget about that, right? And then, of course, we finished the last quarter of the year very strong. So it was just that middle that was – man, it was hot garbage. There's no doubt about it. Jeff in the chat says, I hear what you're saying on Joe Barry. My thing is then produce. He has never produced even an average defense with the talent he has this year. It is do or die. No more defense. No more defense for Joe Barry. Get it done. You make a good point, Jeff. Everywhere he's went, they really the numbers have been bad. There's no doubt about that. All right, let me do this. We're over the hour mark. I probably shouldn't do it. I'm going to do it anyway. I want to show y'all some film here in a second, but I thought this was cool. This stat here, let me just share the screen to make it easier for you guys. I want you to see this. This is wild. So, you know, the Johnny Manziel documentary's out, right? And everybody's talking about just how horrible quarterback Johnny Manziel was. Look at this comparison. This came from @ClapDan. Said Johnny Manziel's career stats, 193 yards per game. Justin Fields is, what'd you say, Jacob?
It's just bad. That's just really bad.
Johnny Manziel's yards per game, 193. Justin Fields, 165. One touchdown per game for Johnny Manziel, 0.96 touchdowns for Justin Fields. 2.7% interception percentage, 3.6 for Justin Fields. What does RT even mean? I'm trying to think here.
Oh, what would that be? Rating?
Okay, so it might be okay. So it's just rating as opposed to QBR.
Oh no, QBR. Yeah, I think that's what it is.
Well, they do have two different ones. They got like quarterback rating and then yeah. So 74.4 for Johnny Manziel. It's 79.7 for Justin Fields. QBR 52.4 for Johnny Manziel. It's 42.9 for Justin Fields. 0.25 win percentage for Johnny Manziel, only 0.2% win percentage for Justin Fields. Boys, Johnny Manziel was a better quarterback than Justin Fields has been to this point in his career. Now, again, you guys have heard me say it. It's early. Justin Fields could turn out to be a good quarterback. I'm not writing that off. But there is absolutely zero evidence that suggests that at the moment. And it's just amazing that the mainstream media overlooked that. All right. I'm going to go to my program here. I want to show you guys just a couple of things, and we're going to get out of here. We got to make this quick because we were way over on time. Let me share the screen here. And you guys confirm that you can see this, please.
Gotcha.
All right, cool. Let's zoom it in a little bit. Let's get funky here. All right. So this is the throw that we showed you guys yesterday, right? This was Jordan Love. You guys remember me saying he looked the safety off, how he stayed looking left? I tried to zoom in right there to show you guys that, and then last second snaps back right because he was going up against cover one man. right? So here's a better view that the Packers released today. Check this out. Watch his face. Left, left, left. Here's the hitch. Now he's right. Holds the safety to the center of the field, and look at his throw. Right on the money, dude. Right on the freaking money. Right.
He wears number 10 because he throws dimes.
I love it, dude. I love it. Check this out. This is cool too. Watch him celebrate, right? He's got his boy Christian Watson there.
Going up.
I apologize. Look, there's Christian, right? Now look at this. Jaden Reed, right? That tells you those three guys were in the route combination, right? The route concept. So now look at the next one. Look right here. That's Luke Musgrave. So your 11 personnel was Jaden Reed over Samori Toure, Luke Musgrave over DeGuara, whoever else, Tyler Davis. So that's going to be your number 1 tight end. This is going to be your number 3 receiver. Dobbs was the one catching the deep pass, not Christian Watson, not the speed demon Jaden Reed, not Mr. 21-mile-an-hour Luke Musgrave. It was Dobbs over the top against cover 1 man, which means they probably drew some attention underneath to Christian Watson. I just thought that was cool. Now, defensive line play. This is where it gets fun, all right? This first video right here is Kenny Clark. I want you to key in right here on number 75, okay? Right here. That's Kenny Clark, okay? And he's going to be in a 4-tech. This is that look, that tight look is what they're practicing here. A 9-4-4-9. Kenny's going to be playing a 4-tech, which is directly over top of the tackle, all right? And I want you to watch him right here. Watch him. He's going to punch his chest, swat and swim, and then use the old Reggie White hump move. And I want you to look where the O-line ends up here, guys. I'm going to zoom in. See him over to the left. Look at this. Punch, right? And look at that. Look at the swat and swim, right? Here's the swat. He's going to swim over the top with the other arm. Now watch this. Here's the hump move. Look where the O-lineman ends up losing. Look. And this poor guy right here that has zero calf muscles playing quarterback, right? Look how close Kenny is. He's dead. He is dead. And that was in no time, too. Like that quarterback's going to have to sidestep left, and he still humps him out of the way. No pun intended. There you go. All right. So moving on to the next play. That was our boy Kenny, right? Next play here, we got Devontae Wyatt rep. All right. What I want you to focus in on is on the right side here. He's going to be over in this area right here. 74 is kind of covering him up, okay? I don't know what Mini-Me's doing here, but 74 is going to be covering him up, all right? Check it out. It's another tight look. He's going to be in a 4-tech directly over the tackle. A 9-4-4-9 is what they're mimicking here, although all the linemen aren't on the field. That's what they're practicing. You're going to see a bull rush and then a speed to the inside. Watch real close there next to 74. Look at this bull rush. Watch the lineman, number 61 right there. Watch his feet. Look at him. Now watch, and he literally bull rushes him and then just speeds inside. Sack. Look at this. Look at the guy flinch. Look at no calves flinch right there. Oh, crap. Right? Beautiful rep by Wyatt. Absolutely gorgeous. All right, let's go on to the next one. This next one right here is Preston Smith. Now, when you talk about that tight front, 9-4-4-9, Preston is playing the wide 9 right here, okay? And he's going to be off the right side of the screen. It's going to be hard to see him. It's going to twitch a little bit here as I adjust the height, but you're going to see him come off the edge. I want you to watch what Preston does here, man. An absolute bull rush. He wins low. He stays low. And watch how his feet stay on track with the quarterback. Watch this bull rush. Bang. Look at the lean. Look at his feet going straight to the quarterback. And by the way, that's a hold. That's getting called 9 out of 10 times as a hold, right? Preston absolutely dominates that rep. All 3 of those plays, guys, that we just showed you in those one-on-one blocking or whatever, all 3 of them, our guys absolutely dominate. Kenny out of the 4-tech, Devontae Wyatt out of the 4-tech, Preston out of the wide 9. And listen, the Bengals don't have a great offensive line. I'm not going to sit here and pretend they do. But that is an NFL offensive line trying to put in decent work in training camp, and they got dominated. Go ahead, Jake.
No, I've watched that sequence. It's a really cool drill if you look at it, because it's basically your starting 5 offensive linemen, and then they take a drill. They take your left, stage right, audience left, however you want to say it. You start with your edge defender. They do a one-on-one. They go to your your D end, and then they go to your nose, and vice versa. But if you actually stopped and watched the beginning, Justin Hollins actually won his first battle off the edge, and then it went to, I believe, who was your first clip that you showed us?
Kenny.
Yeah.
Kenny.
And then it went to Devontae Wyatt. And then, or no, I'm sorry, I think it went to Slayton. And Slayton was maybe the only one that you could
I seen
argue
Slayton, yeah.
didn't quite win, but he didn't lose. If anything, like if that quarterback's holding the ball for, a 2 or 3 second drop, he's going to still get there. So I would argue the only one that maybe didn't make that play and win that one-on-one would be Slayton. But even then, he still was pushing that pocket. So, and then, like I said, Justin Hollins? That's not trying to say. Justin Hollins.
Yeah.
He won his rep too. So, like you said, we're not going against the end-all be-all of offensive lines here, but it's really encouraging to see them making those strides.
Tim, what'd you think about that defensive tape, man?
I think it's awesome and it's poetic because when I watch those clips, especially of Wyatt and Kenny Clark, it's literally all the stuff that I was trying to document last week after practice, that this D-line group stays late. Kenny Clark is the first one over there leading that group, and that's exactly what they were working on the sleds, man. They were bull rushing and getting off the block like repeatedly, and every single time Kenny was showing these guys technique. And so now we watch it in a joint practice when it's not our guys that they're working against and it's not a tackling dummy that they're working against, and you literally see this already translating to the field. It gives me goosebumps, man. Those are great clips right there that you broke down, Clayton. That's just a perfect example of what I saw with my own eyes, man. It's crazy.
It's awesome, dude. I love it. Jeff said Kenny had that guard looking like a drunken sailor. And there is football on right now, so we're going to wrap this thing up. But Eric says this Texans-Patriots game is like watching paint dry. Jeff said they are setting up these linemen with their speed and then transitioning to power. Then when they have them up high and off balance, love it. Yeah, great center of gravity for sure. Jeff, appreciate the kind words, buddy. He said Clayton, nice work, and share it. Love it. Our shower says they look beastly in those reps. Nice detailed analysis. Appreciate it, man. And then, of course, Mike in the chat says great detailed coverage, fellas. Nice work as always. Hey, we appreciate everybody hanging out with us. We're going to wrap this thing up. Before I do, I thought this was cool. You guys know DJ Reader was the one that Elton Jenkins absolutely pimp slapped. All right, so he came out, and here's a quote Ryan Wood posted. He actually tweeted this of Ryan Wood on Twitter. He said, Bengals defensive tackle DJ Reader might not be Elton Jenkins' biggest fan, but he was impressed with Jordan Love today. Quote, he seemed more confident under center. He seemed like he was feeling good. The offense was doing what it was doing. He was having a good day. He looked decent back there. He wasn't just running to take off, wasn't doing any of that stuff. He was trying to go through his reads. We did a good job of staying off of him. I thought he was decent. He had a good demeanor back there. I look at a lot of quarterbacks and see what they've got going on, especially because I'm right there on the ball. He has a good demeanor and things like that. So I thought that was pretty cool, man. And that's now about I think the fourth or fifth defender that's played against Jordan Love, that's bragged on Jordan Love like, hey, this dude can play. This dude can ball. So, again, you got to put it on the field when it's a real game and a real regular season game. I completely understand that. But I think things are looking up. All right, let's wrap this thing up. Jacob, you got any parting thoughts, buddy?
No, man. Like I said, just let's get excited for tomorrow. Let's all maybe try to – is Ryan doing a watch party, it sounded like, possibly?
He was going to try to. I don't want to answer for him. If
maybe,
I had to guess,
maybe I'll have to look out for that if it's
Well, if it's at all possible, we're going to do one. But again, he's got a lot going on, so it may not happen. It's something he wants to do for sure, and I know a lot of people would like to hang out. That would be awesome. I know I would enjoy hanging out. So we'll keep you guys posted on that for sure. If it does come to be this week, if not, maybe it'll be next week. But when it does, we'll make sure you guys know. We'll blast it out on Twitter and all that good stuff. Tim, do you got any parting thoughts, buddy?
Bunch nasty X, baby. Let's go. We're going to make T-shirts, Clayton. We're going to get Scoot on there and Musgrave, and got to do Bunch Nasty X T-shirts, man. It's going to be awesome.
That can be
Go
cool.
Pack, go, baby. Tomorrow, it's on and cracking.
Let's do it. All right. Again, I want to thank Mike in the chat for the super chat. Thank you so much, Mike Hebring, man. We really appreciate the support. Josh Martin, thank you so much for the super chat. You guys are awesome. Thank you to everyone in the chat. You guys always bring the thunder. It makes it such a better show when you guys are in there commenting. You guys bring the humor. And I tell you what, man, every time I chat with you guys, whether it's Jacob or Tim, Obviously, Paul Bretl, Ryan, Jake Shavink from It's Always Draft Season podcast, on and on and on. And especially, like I said, you guys in the chat, I'm always learning something too, man. That's what this show's all about. Us just being, insanely loyal Packer fans trying to learn the game at a different level and learn it together. I will say this. Yesterday, we hit an all-time high in live viewers of 56 viewers. Tonight, we hit 58, and then we jumped to 60. So the new record for the live stream is 60 that we hit tonight. So thank you all for dropping in. If you don't care, hit that subscribe button. Don't worry about notifications. We don't want to bother you every time we post a video or go live. If you want to turn it on, great. We're just trying to get those subs up so we can help get the channel recognized so other Packer fans can find us for sure. Also, in the upper left corner, scan that QR code. If you're watching on YouTube and you're like, man, I'd like to hear this in podcast form, scan that QR code in the upper left. It's going to take you to Packernet Podcast. And what's cool about that is you're going to find way better podcasts on there than this show here. Just by scanning that QR code, man. We've got some awesome stuff going on over there. Got Jacob with the Packernet Fantasy Podcast. You got Ryan Schlip with Packernet Podcast. Been my favorite podcast now for about 4 years running. And Jake Shavink, It's Always Draft Season Podcast, on and on and on. So make sure you check that out, gang. We're going to get out of here. We went way over. Appreciate everybody in the chat. For those of you listening on the pod, thank you for making us a part of your day. As always, let's go out and be the change we want to see in the world, and go Pack, go.
The power sweep. Actually, it's the lead play in our offense. Tell the tackle to take the defensive end if he's over him. If he's not, we drive down on the first man who is inside. Fullback, we tell him to take the first man outside the offensive tackle. No one shows. He goes right by them and fields inside. If the YN has the linebacker taken out, he cuts inside. If the YN has the linebacker in, he comes all the way around. If you look at this play, what we're trying to get is a seal here and a seal here, and try to run this play in the alley.